This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ethiopian government officials accuse local Tigray forces of taking 10,000 prisoners as the conflict spills over its borders. South Africa State Capture Commission to hear former President Zuma's application to have Zondo recuse himself. And talks on Libya's future adjourn without naming a transitional government. What next for the country? Hello and thank you for joining us. This is Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutwa in Nairobi, also coming up this hour. China's latest economic figures show it's continuing to recover financially from the coronavirus pandemic. And in sport, Tanzanian WBF super welterweight Hassan Mwakinyo wins on home soil to defend his title. We begin with the conflict in Ethiopia, where government forces say they've captured a town in the northern state of Tigray. Government officials accuse local Tigray forces of taking 10,000 prisoners from the town of Almata as they fled. There was no immediate comment from Tigray's leaders. Meanwhile, Tigray's regional president has accused the neighboring country of Eritrea of sending tanks and troops into his region. He says Eritrea is supporting the Ethiopian government's offensive. Eritrea has denied that and accused Tigray of firing rockets at two of its airports. Meanwhile, the UN Refugee Agency says over 20,000 Ethiopian refugees have crossed into neighboring Sudan as fighting in Tigray rages on. Here is more on that.
Whether by boat, foot, or even wading through the rivers, Ethiopian refugees have been arriving in Sudan by any means necessary. Data released by UNHCR indicates that at least 20,000 refugees have crossed into Sudan. UN and other local agencies have been assisting the growing number of displaced victims of the fighting in Tigray.
The situation is very bad, to put it mildly. There are about 15,000 people here right now who've basically arrived over the last 5 days. We are starting to provide assistance services with UNHCR, WFP, the Sudanese Red Cross, Muslim Aid, and other service providers. And you can see some start of an assistance provision, but much more needs to be done.
Local communities have also been intervening for the refugees.
This is very close to the border. This is Hamdayat town. The community has been very generous. What we see here as well is that the Hamdayat community has provided support to the refugees. They've provided a local tent. We see that in the background. They have given food and they have given other items. So this is also a big thank you to the local community here who are very burdened with this.
As analysts warn of a possible escalation of the Tigray fighting regionally, UNHCR and other aid agencies are preparing for what could be yet another crisis in the Horn of Africa. Jane Keo, CGTN.
Well, earlier we spoke with a security analyst about how the ongoing conflict in Tigray could affect the region.
I think in terms of the bridge between the Prime Minister and TPLF, it's fairly very, very clear. The Prime Minister said there is no room for debate or discussions or, which could lead to de-escalation. Similarly, the TPLF has taken a fairly hard stance with respect to talking to Addis. That can only lead to, further conflict between the two. And the trouble is, like you've alluded to at the top, is the potential for this to not only just spill over into Eritrea, but also on the other side into Sudan. So the potential for this, if it gets protracted as it looks likely, it will not only draw in Eritrea, who have got an axe to grind with TPLF because the 1998-2000 Eritrea-Ethiopia war was launched and headed by TPLF. but also it has a potential of drawing in Sudan. Once it goes beyond Sudan, you're looking at potential of it also involving Egypt and probably the UAE and some other Gulf countries. So it is something that needs an urgent de-escalation from both sides, which doesn't look very likely at the moment. But that is what we are looking at, down the road in the next, in the near and medium term.
Right, well, CGTN's Girum Chala is standing by to bring us more on the situation in Ethiopia. He joins us live from Addis Ababa. Girum, what's the latest you can bring us on the current situation in the Tigray region?
Maya, the North war is also ongoing overnight. We have heard of heavy airstrikes in the Tigray regional state at several locations. The government calls it an important mission of bringing back lawlessness and order into that region. And we have also heard of several casualties. But the most important news is the capture of Alamata town. This is an important strategic location in the Tigray region itself, and the National Defense Force have announced that they have captured that area. So many people, according to state media, came out on the streets expressing happiness that they are now free of the TPLF's leadership. TPLF, on the other side, accused Ethiopia of using airstrikes to affect civilians, not only soldiers, and also attacking infrastructures like dams and factories. The Ethiopian government denies this allegation by TPLF and says that the mission should be over as soon as possible, and they will finish the job without the involvement of countries like Eritrea, as TPLF accuse them of involving themselves. So the war has continued, and several cities seem to be falling under the hands of the Ethiopian National Defense Force, while at the same time TPLF claims that they are still holding strong strategic locations.
And Girum, the UN is warning of a worsening humanitarian situation. What more can you tell us at this time?
Well, the humanitarian situation expectedly is now getting worse and worse by the day, as war is also continuing in different parts of the Tigray regional state. As we know, so far, thousands are crossing borders into Sudan, fearing for their lives, evicted of their locations because of the bombings and also the attacks from both sides, the TPLF side and the National Defense side. So people are still being refugees. People are being homeless because of this situation, and they are now in Sudan crossing borders. According to the UN, and as you've said it, situation is getting worse and it needs immediate solution. One of the other problems that many humanitarian organizations raise is the fact that it is impossible. There is no way to get important amenities like support to those people who are affected by the war because of the road blockage, because of communication problems and others. So this situation is expected, unfortunately, to also get even worse in the coming weeks and months as well, if this war is not going to be concluded soon. The number of casualties is also increasing expectedly because of the war. So we have to also wait and see what's going to be the report of the government, as they are going to update us perhaps by the end of today or tomorrow morning.
All right, Girum, great to have you joining us as always on Africa Live. CGTN's Girum Chala joining us live there from Addis Ababa. Well, staying in Ethiopia, where gunmen ambushed a bus in the western part of the country, killing dozens. At least 34 people died in the ambush in what activists are calling a gruesome attack. There were reports of similar killings in other areas and of people fleeing the violence. In September, armed militia killed at least 45 people in the same region. It does not appear to be connected to the 12-day-old conflict between the Ethiopian government and the Tigray region. Well, former South African President Jacob Zuma is appearing at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture. He had the option to appear via video link or in person. He arrived at the commission venue in Johannesburg on Monday morning. CGTN's Angelo Coppola has more.
The hearing is expected to last 4 days, and Zuma is expected to answer allegations from 34 witnesses who have implicated him in state capture over a number of years. Before the hearing got underway, though, the Deputy Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, actually had to hear an application for him to recuse himself. Zondo addressed the hearing very painstakingly detailing all of his interactions with the ex-president, going back to the early 90s when Zondo was in fact in private practice in KwaZulu-Natal. Zuma's lawyer then took to the stand to begin the recusal process, saying that Zuma was never going to defy the commission. His application, of course, is based on a reasonable person view of the commission and possible bias by the Deputy Chief Justice. Advocate Muzi Sikanane, who's Zuma's lawyer, spent some time highlighting several court cases in defense of their application. It's day one, and most of that day is going to be spent debating the merits of the court rulings in defense of that recusal process. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, talks on Libya's future have adjourned without naming a new government to oversee a transition to possible elections next year. The United Nations envoy for Libya, Stephanie Williams, has expressed satisfaction with the outcome of the talks. 75 delegates selected by the UN to meet in Tunis agreed to hold presidential and parliamentary elections in late December next year. Williams, however, says there is still a lot of work to do and delegates will resume talks online next week to discuss a reformed structure and role for the executive authority. The delegates will also discuss the question of a constitutional basis for the election. Right, well, for more on this story, we're now joined by Bassem Ali, a political analyst at Al Ahram Online. Now, this meeting has been taunted as very significant for the peace process in Libya, yet there are those who view that acting head of the United Nations mission in Libya, Stephanie Williams, is hyping up the progress of Libyan talks in Tunis. What do you think about this?
I think so far both international mediators in the Libyan peace process and the United Nations as well have done a great job in terms of persuading all parties to the conflict to avoid the state of war that has been in place for almost 7 years and sit on the negotiating table in order to reach fruitful results out of this process. In the meantime, Khalifa Haftar agreed to resume oil production. The government of national accord, backed by the Turks and thousands of Syrian mercenaries, have also been convinced to revisit their decision to attack both Sirte and Al-Jufra and negotiate peace. Also elections, whether parliamentary or presidential, have been agreed by next year, and negotiations are ongoing so far in order to discuss more details about both political and military paths. So at this stage, all results are very fruitful, the situation is very promising, and it seems that we are going to hear more and more good news in the coming weeks as they meet again through virtual means in the coming few weeks.
And Bassem Ali, there have been numerous peace deals over the years. What makes this one different, and what will it take for this to bring peace eventually to Libya?
I think this time talks are more promising due to a very important factor, which is war fatigue. Parties to the Libyan conflict have been fighting each other for almost a decade, and the GNA-LNA conflict, if I can say, have been in place for more than 7 years. So throughout this period, many people lost their lives, huge amounts of money were spent. Adding to the equation coronavirus and the huge economic implications that most world states have been suffering from, the cost of continuing war has been huge, and it's now the interest of everyone in Libya to sit and negotiate to end the humanitarian, economic, military crisis and open a new chapter that will involve political and economic cooperation, and on that basis everyone would find themselves dealing with a win-win situation. I think that was not the case a few years ago. Many parties to the Libyan conflict were convinced that war would bring results, but as we reached almost a deadlock, the political and diplomatic process is now seemingly the best possible option for all Libyans in order to end the conflict and pave the way for a political process, if I can say.
All right, thank you very much for your insights there. Political analyst Basim Ali joining us live there from Cairo. Well, it's time for us to take a short break. You're watching Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. U.S. President Donald Trump hints at Biden victory but refuses to concede. And Kenyan Doctors Union issues government with 21-day strike notice amid surge in coronavirus cases.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Welcome back. This is Africa Live. Let's take you to the United States now, where President Donald Trump briefly acknowledged losing the election in a Twitter post, but then backtracked, saying he concedes nothing. He is vowing to keep up a court fight that legal experts say is unlikely to succeed. Toby Muse now reports.
Some news from Donald Trump, or maybe not. Early Sunday, Donald Trump tweeted out that Joe Biden had won the election, but said that the election had been rigged. This was quickly reported as the first time Trump acknowledging Joe Biden's victory. 90 minutes later, Donald Trump took to Twitter again, tweeting out, "Biden only won in the eyes of the fake news media. I concede nothing." Democrats are increasingly impatient with this ongoing standoff and Trump's refusal to concede.
Donald Trump's Twitter feed doesn't make Joe Biden president or not president. The American people did that. What we really want to see this week, Chuck, is the General Services Administration issue that ascertainment so we can start to do the kinds of things you and I talked about a few minutes ago. Meet with these vaccine officials, kind of get the intelligence briefings for the president-elect, the vice president-elect.
The General Services Administration is the entity that oversees the transition process. They will often release funds to transition teams, but also facilitate communications with the federal agencies that the transition team needs to staff up. The General Services Administration is run by a Trump appointee who has so far refused to acknowledge Joe Biden's victory. This means Biden's team does not get access to those transition funds or to the agencies to talk about staffing, agencies that Joe Biden is projected to take control of come January the 20th. Even some Republicans have criticized the fact that Joe Biden is not receiving the intelligence briefings. This is where it's laid out all of the national security threats to the United States.
And I know how difficult it is coming in and going out. And every day that he delays under the pretense that he's simply asking for his legal remedies ultimately is to the country's disadvantage, certainly in the national security space. And I think given the coronavirus pandemic in the effective distribution of the vaccine and a range of other things as well.
All of this occurs as the incoming president is likely to face huge challenges. A deeply polarized country, a weak economy, and what looks to be the third and worst surge of the coronavirus. Toby Muse reporting for CGTN in Arlington, Virginia.
Now, Israel has dispatched a first official delegation to Sudan. The move aims towards formalizing ties between the two countries. Details of the visit are limited, but according to reports out of Jerusalem and Washington, the push is on to bring the sides together before a new U.S. president enters the White House. The one-day return trip heightened speculation Israel could soon strike a peace deal with the Arab-led African country. CGTN's Yasser Hakim now brings us more reports on Sudan's increased engagement with the international community.
An uprising that toppled former President Omar al-Bashir in 2019 paved the way for a new era of open ties between Sudan and the international community. In October, the United States removed Sudan from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. The delisting allows the North African nation to once again access aid and international financing. In the same month, Sudan agreed to normalize relations with Israel.
Sudan has always refused to establish any ties with Israel, even since back in 1967 during the Khartoum summit. Sudan was always in isolation for 30 years. President Trump managed to push Sudan into normalization with Israel in return for lifting the country from the list of nations that support terrorism.
There are ongoing visits and contacts from both sides during the week, and for the first time in history, a commercial flight by Israeli flag carrier El Al was allowed to pass through Sudanese airspace en route to Uganda.
The internal issues are very much more important for the leadership, such as trying to broker deals with the differing revolutionary movements. The Sudanese people are divided over the normalization. The supporters of ties with Israel believe this step will lead to an improvement in relations with the international community, which in turn will reap much needed economic benefits. This is the view of the leadership.
The East African nation might be the third Arab country to open ties with arch-foe Israel, but it might not be the last. Trump had announced that 5 other Arab countries are planning to do the same. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
To Kenya now, where a national union representing doctors has given the government a strike notice. The union is demanding better working conditions following the deaths of 4 more doctors due to COVID-19 over the weekend. CGTN's Robert Nagila has that report.
Dr. Hudson Inyangala, a public health specialist, Dr. Imara Ashraf, a plastic surgeon.
One by one, the names of 10 specialist doctors who recently died from COVID-19 were read out at a media briefing called by the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union. 4 of them within the last 24 hours. 25 doctors have died from the virus since March, with over 2,000 infected due to what the union is calling negligent working conditions and a lack of support from the government. The doctors' union has now issued a 21-day strike notice to the government if their work conditions and welfare issues are not addressed.
This strike notice will expire on the 6th of December 2020.
The union is demanding the government supply personal protective equipment to all health facilities, recruit 2,000 additional doctors, create dedicated health facilities for health workers, and meet treatment costs for COVID-19.
The strike notice couldn't have come at a worse time for Kenya. The country is in the middle of the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, recording the highest rate of infections and deaths since the virus was first detected in the country.
The union blames the political class for putting politics before health. The government wants to hold a referendum on constitutional change in June next year, and a number of COVID-19 cases have been traced back to political rallies aimed at gaining support for the referendum.
Their political activities are increasing the numbers of COVID-19 cases who go to overstretched health facilities and equally increasing the burden of the doctors in the facilities.
The government says it's banned all political rallies, but town hall-style meetings can still take place under strict COVID-19 protocols. Currently, Kenya has 9,096 doctors serving a population of about 48 million people. But if the strike does go on, its impact on the fight against COVID-19 could have deep ramifications on the country's health sector for years to come. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Let's take you to Nigeria now, where hair care is a lucrative business venture. Women in the country are willing to purchase hair, both human and synthetic, as well as spend on hair care products. But as CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports, the market is mostly import-driven.
Precious Chimobi has a knack for spinning synthetic fiber into wigs. The master weaver, as he's fondly called, trades in anything hair. His store is a hub for assorted human hair, locally hand-braided wigs, extensions, shampoos, relaxers, and much more. Chimobi's customers spend a minimum $140 to buy a human hair wig and around $50 to purchase monthly products. Most of the products here are imported.
We order from different countries. It depends, as I said. We can order from Germany, from China, or from Spain, anywhere of your choice that is okay for you, that is affordable. The weave-ons you import is more better, is more 100% sure human hair that can last, that you can use and share with someone else. The weave-ons that they order for is imported weave-ons that they need. They say they need imported weave-ons. That's why I choose to order it, because they don't have it here.
The hair I buy for here, they are really good. Their wigs are really good. The PC coil, the bone straights, the hair, they are really good. I don't have any bad experience. They are really good. They're actually good. They usually grow my front hair.
Nigeria has one of the biggest hair and beauty industries in Africa, alongside Cameroon and South Africa. Euromonitor International estimates $1.1 billion worth of shampoos, relaxers and hair lotions were sold in the three countries in 2013 alone. Meanwhile, sales of wigs, extensions and wigs are estimated at $6 billion a year, with importers competing to get a slice of the multi-billion-dollar industry.
It is easier for importers of hair, artificial hair, to import them than for them to establish factories, because of the hindrances that we have in this country. Of course, you know, everybody knows the hindrance of power, electricity, and of course the hindrance of insecurity. And so it's easier for somebody to just travel abroad and get these things in and start selling in few days and get return. The next question is whether they have the raw material locally to do this. If the raw materials are not there and they still have to import the raw materials, then it's almost as good as importing completely without the complications of producing locally.
Encouraging local manufacturing could help Nigeria cash in on the growing hair market. This would not only create much-needed jobs for the unemployed population of over 21 million, but also boost the economy. Industry players say with the right infrastructure, Nigeria can develop the sector, earn big from homegrown products, and export them too. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And it's time for us to take another short break ahead of all the latest in business. Here's what's coming up. China's latest economic figures show it's continuing to recover financially from the coronavirus pandemic. And Nigeria's government approves free business registration for small businesses.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours, no break.
Welcome back into the business now. New economic numbers show China's economy continues to recover from the pandemic. The National Bureau of Statistics released the figures this morning. Industrial production, a key indicator, went up 6.9% last month compared to the year before. Retail sales grew over 4% but missed some key expectations. The monthly growth rate of the catering industry turned positive. Meanwhile, the surveyed unemployment rate in cities is 5.3%, slightly lower than September. Now, 15 countries from across Asia-Pacific have signed the world's largest trade deal. It comes after 8 years of negotiations, pushed back deadlines and the withdrawal of India. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, was signed on the final day of this year's ASEAN Summit. CGTN's Rian Malza reports.
This was not how the leaders would have imagined it when talks began 8 years ago. 15 ministers putting pen to paper back in their home countries, watching each other on checkerboard split screens. But they finally got it done, inking the free trade deal encompassing the 10 ASEAN countries, China, Japan, South Korea, Australia and New Zealand, comprising 30% of the world's population and nearly 30% of its GDP.
It will send a strong message that affirms ASEAN's leading role in supporting the multilateral trading system, creating a new trading structure in the region, enabling sustainable trade facilitation, revitalizing the supply chains disrupted by COVID-19, and assisting post-pandemic recovery.
Mutually beneficial cooperation in East Asia will help boost global development and economic growth, and our cooperation is indispensable in such a process. We are also committed to the path of solidarity and development.
The deal should remove tariff and many non-tariff barriers and boost investment, e-commerce and cooperation in areas such as technology. RCEP will make these countries more interdependent, and that increasing economic closeness will be an incentive to avoid inflaming geopolitical tensions and disputes. And there are a few of those. Between 4 of the ASEAN countries and China over the South China Sea, between the East Asian countries, and more recently, between Australia and China.
I welcome the fact that Australia and China have been able to continue as partners in the RCEP agreement. It's an important sign of our willingness to continue to work in regional cooperation and regional economic partnership.
RCEP won't actually come into effect until next year, but it will still be a timely and vital boost to a region and world struggling to emerge from the economic damage wreaked by the pandemic. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Kuala Lumpur.
Let's turn our attention to Egypt now, where there's been a flurry of investments and acquisitions in the medical industry in recent years. Local and foreign investors are attracted by good returns and reforms in the country's healthcare sector, leading to acquisitions in hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, and medical equipment plants. CGTN's Yasser Hakim reports the trend is expected to continue as healthcare is seen as a defensive sector in the face of market fluctuations, making it attractive to investors.
The healthcare sector in Egypt is gaining momentum in the last couple of years. United Pharma, Egypt's leading player in the injectable space, was acquired by an American firm, Cleopatra Hospitals Group, which bought several of these hospitals and medical centers. Meanwhile, a Saudi investment group is set to establish a $700 million medical city in Alexandria.
There's growth in the healthcare industry, and it's mainly due to the reform happening. We can see that from 2 years ago, we implemented the rule of governance. And because of governance, we do have now a lot of investment and lack of the previous fragmented system. Even from governmental spending, we increased from around 35 billion in 2017 in terms of governmental expenditure on healthcare to reach around 70 the year after. And currently, we can see that it reached around 250 billion Egyptian pounds.
Foreign investments in healthcare are estimated at about $3 billion and increasing, mainly from the Gulf region, China, Europe, and the United States.
Today, we have 156 pharmaceutical plants in Egypt, covering 90% of the market in terms of the number of medicinal packs and 80% in terms of financial value. The pricing system has improved. Before, it was not so profitable, but amendments by the health authority made it even more profitable, and it became very attractive for investors.
Egypt's geographical location facilitates exports to several continents. The North African country is also top-ranked in pharmaceutical production and exporting in the region.
A population of 100 million, it's a very good market. We still got very good room for expansion for a lot of industries. We are talking not in only healthcare, also telecommunication and the merge of telecommunication and healthcare, like the e-health. Currently, this year, we do have, and of course, due to COVID, a lot of investment in e-health, and we are expecting a lot of foreign investment in that. We do have 2 companies right now in 2020 investing in e-health. We're expecting up to 10 or even 15 more companies to be operating using e-health and e-pharmacy in 2021.
The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic this year has been a catalyst for more expenditure in the medical sector.
In general, the past 6-7 months, ever since most of our nations worldwide have been in lockdown, people have used these consumables for their own personal health, whereas before, in comparison to pre-COVID, these consumables were only used in facilities or in private clinics or in hospitals in general. The cost per unit when it comes to producing PPE gear is a lot less, given the fact that it's produced in Egypt, and this will in fact affect the Egyptian economy on a very, very positive result, where it increases the nation's GDP, their gross domestic product, and in fact it introduces a new manufacturing sector to our Egyptian economy.
Experts believe there will be an influx of investments in the long term. As the new comprehensive health insurance program kicks in, it will require a lot of hospitals, medicine, medical centers and equipment to cover the 100 million Egyptians that will be registered as the country rolls out the universal healthcare system. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The Nigerian government has approved free business registration for small and medium-sized enterprises. The move is expected to help up to 250,000 business owners who cannot afford the fee of about $50 to formalize their businesses. As Kelechi Emekalam reports, the approval, which came with allotted quota for each state of the nation, is part of the government's post-COVID-19 survival intervention to support the sector.
In Nigeria's capital, Asma'u Yusuf readies her special healthy smoothies and hopes to make some favorable sales today. She's been struggling to break even with this 2-year-old business. Prices of fruits have gone up and affected her profit. Asma'u's business has remained unregistered because her monthly gain of about $40 is too meager to pay the $50 business registration fee. And not formalizing her business means her sales would be limited to just friends and family. But she's set to take advantage of government's free business registration intervention for businesses like hers.
We're very happy because if the federal government, if they bring this, as they bring this one now, I will register my products, and at least I will reach out to people. People will reach out to me.
About 250,000 small businesses would benefit from this government intervention. Small businesses constitute about 90% of Nigeria's business economy, and the sector drives 50% of employment. However, the cost of business operation here is higher compared to elsewhere in the world. Several factors such as poor infrastructure and recently the COVID-19 disruptions are responsible for this.
Because of the way the light issue is going, it's really affecting us. Like for 3 to 4 days now, there have not been lights. I think since Friday, it really affects us because we buying fuel every day from morning to night. It's not really easy. The cost is high.
It is one thing to register businesses, to have businesses registered. It is another thing to have them start off. It is another thing then for them to sustain. So this policy or this initiative by federal government is not the end in itself. It's a means to an end. The final narrative will be justified by how many businesses after registration are able to start off How many businesses after registration are able to sustain business activities? How many of these businesses are able to contribute to the economy? For me, the initiative is good. It's a very good initiative. But then, will it be able, or will it alone be able to carry out or to contribute significantly to the dream or the aspiration that we want to see in terms of economic development?
Government may need to do more than free business registration to sustain actual economic growth. Many propose that authorities simplify access to capital loans for small businesses, strengthen infrastructure that would in turn create an enabling environment for businesses to thrive. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
In Uganda, stores are offering early Black Friday deals and price cuts online to try to stop crowds of people cramming into shops during the COVID-19 pandemic. Isabel Nakiria now reports from Kampala.
Online and retail stores in Uganda are rolling out Black Friday deals all this month. Instead of the traditional short-term price cuts around the 27th November. Even so, the shopping holiday is expected to be lower key than previous years due to the economic hardship brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic.
The deals we have up to 80% is a reflection of Jumia's commitment, of our partners and our vendors' commitment to giving back to our customers who have suffered quite a lot, both on the health side, the economic side, and also on a personal level as well.
Black Friday usually offers shoppers good deals for early Christmas shopping. With health concerns due to the pandemic, customers are avoiding stores and buying online. But fashion stores say they are finding it hard to get the right sizes, especially if they have to make online deliveries. And social distancing and closed changing rooms in physical stores means brands are having to get creative.
It's very tricky because sometimes you've not met this client before, but then if she sends you a picture, from the picture you can try to refine. You're like, okay, she might be a 14 or a 10 or an 8, like that.
Shoppers are also embracing online shopping as an easy and less risky way to get groceries.
It's very safe, first of all, because they deliver from a distance, so there's no contact even while they deliver. So that makes me feel comfortable, knowing at least I don't know where this person has been, I don't have to have contact with them, and also it's very convenient for me.
So even if there's no mad dash on Black Friday itself this year, store owners are hoping deals throughout November will help them stay in business. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Well, we're taking another short break. Here's what's coming up on Africa Live. Thriving Mogadishu nightlife marks return to stability after decades of conflict.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Now, nightlife is back in Mogadishu, the Somalia capital that's been at war for almost 2 decades. The improving security situation has seen a sharp rise in the number of overseas Somalis returning home and creating business and job opportunities. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo filed this report.
Ferdowsa Mohammed, a television journalist, is meeting her friends at this coffee shop in Mogadishu. It's one of several that have opened in the capital recently.
I come here in the evening after work to hang out with friends and network.
my colleagues are here with me today. Beautiful places like this have helped transform the city.
Returned experts and locals have teamed up to create hangout spots for young people, many of whom are hoping to take part in the rebuilding process.
People returning from the diaspora are coming back with new business ideas. The city is transforming, and the newly found stability has given people like us assurance to open coffee shops like this one that contribute to the economy and provide jobs for young people.
Business is booming across much of the city, with malls remaining open until late at night. Rickshaw drivers say business is improving compared to previous years.
Many young people operate rickshaws at night. It's a major source of employment for thousands of young people. I operate during the day and sometimes at night, depending on how much I have made. It's much better at night, as many people move around to pass time.
I operate at night, shortly after evening prayers. I graduated last year from the School of Nursing, but haven't landed a job yet. Instead of staying at home, my friend works during the day and I take over in the evening. I enjoy working at night and I'm happy with whatever little I make.
It's been 8 years since militant group Al-Shabaab was dislodged from the capital. Police maintain regular checkpoints to deter insurgents from carrying out bombings in the city. It's almost 10 p.m. and I'm standing at Makkah Al-Mukarramah, one of the busiest streets in the capital. Most businesses are located along this important stretch of road in the capital that was once the scene of deadly bombings carried out by militant group Al-Shabaab. As a sign of changing times, several hotels have begun to provide nighttime entertainment. Musicians stage live performances at some of the seafront restaurants. And as the city comes to life, authorities are urging members of the public to increase cooperation with security forces in order to protect the recent progress. Abdul Aziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
And it's now time for the sports. Here's what's coming up. Tanzanian WBF super welterweight Hassan Mwakinyo wins on home soil to defend his title.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.